BeTheTalk, episode 169, featuring Melissa Agnes. Welcome to BeTheTalk. We go behind the talk 7 days a week for tips and techniques to help you change the world. I'm Nathan Eckel, and a talker myself, I'm interviewing others who change the world with their talk. You can too, even if you've never given a talk before. Let's get started with today's show. We are live with Melissa Agnes. Melissa, are you ready to talk?
I'm ready to talk, Nathan.
Author of Crisis Ready, Building an Invincible Brand in an Uncertain World, Melissa Agnes is a leading authority on crisis preparedness, reputation management, and brand protection. Agnes is a coveted speaker, commentator, and advisor to some of today's leading organizations faced with the greatest risks. Melissa Agnes, welcome to the talk.
Thank you for having me.
Your talk is called The Secret to Successful Crisis Management in the 21st Century. I mean, aren't we getting pinged with this every single day? There are data breaches. There are questions of videos that we see from body armor on police departments. You're addressing all of these things. And I love about your talk, it's real world. It was for TEDx, the city of Los Angeles. It was their emergency preparedness management department. And you have real life stories and case studies of brands and organizations that did it right proactively, and those that maybe didn't think that far ahead. So please just summarize and take us behind the talk.
Sure. Behind the talk. So the whole thing with me is about being crisis ready. And being crisis ready means that we're not reliant on a stagnant plan anymore. Instead, because things move too fast, especially, and remembering that my TEDx talk was for emergency management professionals, but I also knew that it needed to go beyond that because it was going to go down, in YouTube history. The whole thing about being crisis ready, so not being dependent on a plan, but having an entire team that instinctively knows how to identify risk, assess its material impact on the organization, and respond in a way that actually increases stakeholder trust and credibility and goodwill in the brand. Whether you're an emergency management department, law enforcement, government agency, straight through to the corporate world. And so that's the main message, and that's my main message, and that was the focus of my TEDx talk.
Sure, and just we're gonna just make it really, really apparent, this whole idea of trust and emotional trust. And so many people, it was maybe 20 years ago, somebody described it to me as like a bank account. And when those withdrawals are unexpectedly made, you've got to have enough in the bank.
Was that 20 years ago? Somebody explained that to you, or was that from my TEDx talk?
Well, no, it was about 20 years ago. But then I'm just trying to really bring everybody here. When we talk about trust, when we talk about emotional intelligence, we talk about all these things. It's a very real thing. It's a very intangible thing. And the way that our world is going, you've got to have trust, because when you don't have trust, that's when people rightfully kind of freak out a little bit. And that's why your talk is just so amazing. Not only did you lay out that whole concept, but you are giving examples, and I believe it was a police department that actually built proactive trust. I can't think of a more kind of shark-infested waters on every angle, and then you have these police professionals. The vast majority, I would like to believe, are trying to do the right thing, and yet we've got many examples that are touted in the media, and rightfully so, of the bad things that happen. How does a police department, how does some kind of governmental agency like that in such a divisive domain build that trust? I love how you scaled it out for us. So take it away.
Proactively every day. That's it. It's taking one step in the right direction every day. And there's some great examples of law enforcement agencies doing it. A couple that I highlight in my talk, one in particular is Mountain View Police Department. They do phenomenal work. And the reason I asked you that about the Bank of Community Trust is that it's Captain Chris Shung, who, and I quote him in my talk, I quote him all the time. He does incredible work, of Mountain View Police Department in Silicon Valley, California, that he says every day Mountain View PD takes steps to proactively make what he calls deposits into their bank of community trust. He says that in a crisis, we will have to make a withdrawal, but the goal is to have enough trust left over. And how they do that is brilliant. I mean, for example, Mountain View PD will tweet out, because they know their community's on Twitter. They're very engaged on Twitter with their community. So they tweet out things like pictures of law enforcement professionals that are with their radar guns, right, doing traffic patrol. And they'll say, we're on the corner of this street and this street. And at first, their community would come and tweet back and say, hello, how are you ever going to catch us speeding if you tell us where you are? And it's what they responded with, where their brilliance lay. And they would respond and say, but our goal is not to catch you speeding. Our goal is road and community safety. And if we can make you think before pushing down that pedal by putting out a tweet, then we are accomplishing our goal. And that is just so powerful, just in a very simplistic, proactive initiative. And it does wonders for Mountain View PD and their trust.
And so the police chief is absolutely brilliant there, because what he did is he said, I'm a person too, you're people too. Nobody likes getting pulled over. We don't like pulling you over. We don't like having to pull rank on you. Why not just be aware, and let's write less quota tickets today. I love it. It's the same, where I'm on the same wavelength as you.
Yeah. And it debunks the whole myth of where they just want to meet a quota, right? No, it's for a greater purpose. And it's bringing that to make it real for their community and to show them, and it does wonders for them. And that's just one example of from them and of one great law enforcement agency. There's tons out there.
So let's take a little flip of the coin here. I'm thinking Me Too. I'm thinking large institutions. I'm talking data breaches. There are it's like everybody else out there is not being proactive enough, or they're just plain doing the wrong thing. So assuming the listener, okay, Talk Universe, assuming they are in charge of or working in an organization that's not doing the right thing, what are some things that an organization can start doing without blowing the lid off of everything to start correcting the ship so that someday they can become that proactive?
So we're going to take that question and also assume that the culture is right.
Okay.
This is not a corrupt culture of an organization.
Thank
this is a culture that prioritizes people first above process and bottom line.
It's a big assumption, so I appreciate that you bring that up.
Well, just because otherwise I could talk for hours on that one. So we're going to assume that. Starting to become crisis ready, there's some essential things that you can start doing that are very easy to do and yet so powerful. One of those things, as a first step, is to define issue versus crisis for your organization. Because when we define what an issue versus a crisis is, and it's not the same for every organization, then we can assess a situation properly and respond effectively. So would you like me to define?
Oh, absolutely. And I love that you separate that, the issue versus the crisis.
It's so important, because an issue today can go viral, and virality is not the criteria for defining crisis. So an issue can go viral and not escalate to crisis level. And that's so essential to understand if you're going to respond properly. So a crisis, definition of a crisis, is a negative event or situation that stops business as usual to some extent. Stops business as usual to some extent because it needs to be escalated all the way up to leadership. Why? Because it needs their guidance, their directive, their decision-making, because the situation threatens, and I'm going to underscore the word long-term, impact on one or all of the following 5 things: people, the environment, business operations, the organization's reputation, and or the organization's bottom line. So it's a negative event that stops business as usual to some extent, needs escalation to leadership because it presents long-term material impact on one or all of those 5 things. Whereas an issue is a negative event or situation that doesn't stop business as usual. Issue management is business as usual on hyperdrive because it does not threaten long-term material impact on any one of those 5 things. And I have a great example that compares apples with apples, if you'd like, to make that really real.
Sure.
Okay. So do you remember what happened at the Oscars in 2017?
If I watched them, I would. So you're going to have to bring me up.
I don't watch them either, but this was all of us. So
I'm forgetting. There's so much drama every year. I forget. What was it that year?
So at the end, the coveted, award at the end is Best Picture. La La Land was named Best Picture in 2017. And so everybody from La La Land gets up onto stage. There are 3 acceptance speeches in, And all of a sudden they go, oops, La La Land didn't win. Moonlight won. So this whole fiasco, this embarrassing moment.
It was another Steve Harvey moment with Miss Philippines instead of Miss Venezuela or whatever it was, because that's what happened at Miss America or
Yes,
or Miss Universe.
Yes, except that this one blew up even further because it was the Oscars, and it happened live. And then so this whole embarrassing moment took place. Nobody really knew what to do and how to go about it. Nobody, La La Land, Moonlight. And for days, the buzz was all about on social media, went viral, the crisis at the Oscars. Now, Nathan, let me ask you this. In accordance with the definitions that I gave you, was this an issue or a crisis, do you think, for the Oscars?
For the Oscars, I don't think that would threaten the long-term stability of the Oscars as an institution. So I would say it's probably an issue rather than a crisis.
It didn't stop business as usual, right? I said business as usual on hyperdrive.
Yeah.
That's what this was, even though it went viral. And you're absolutely right. It has no long-term material impact on the brand, on people. Putting that in context, a crisis for the Oscars would be, and I'll knock on wood, God forbid, a terrorist threat. Mm-hmm. That would be a crisis for the Oscars. Okay. A little mishap of this assortment is not a crisis. Mm-hmm. Now let's take that same exact situation and PricewaterhouseCoopers, PwC, the accounting firm that is responsible who has had a relationship with the Oscars for over 70 years and is responsible with the honor of, taking all the ballots, figuring out who won, and handing off those envelopes. They handed off the wrong envelope. That's what happened. Issue or crisis for PwC?
Yeah, I think that would be kind of a crisis in terms of ever having them do it in the future.
Right? So impact on, let's picture, I love to do this. Let's picture leadership. Because
and their brand is all trust and complete lockdown. And we are completely, in every way.
We manage your money.
We're ethical. We're detailed. We don't make mistakes. And
we handed off the wrong envelope. Right? So what's the risk there? The risk on reputation is, well, if you can't hand off the right envelope, what else can't you do that I'm trusting you to do? That's a little bit more serious than that. And then I say, so business as usual stops. Can you picture leadership going into work that next day? That was not business as usual. That was managing to make sure that they weren't impacted long-term with the relationship with the Oscars, making sure that perception on the brand reputation wasn't lost. That was a potential crisis for PwC. And I say potential crisis because PwC was crisis ready and they managed to take a potential crisis and de-escalate it down to issue and manage it beautifully. But they were in crisis mode. So we have the same situation, two different brands, viral issue for one, crisis for another.
Very well explained. And we've been having a very fascinating discussion with Melissa Agnes, the author of and the speaker at the TEDx City of Los Angeles, called The Secret to Successful Crisis Management in the 21st Century is her talk. And we are going to be right back with her talking even more detailed in the Blitz Round. People ask, how could I start a 7-day-a-week podcast? It's because of what I've learned from my mentors. Some of the best mentors in history aren't around anymore. They've left hours of one-on-one mentoring behind in their books. Each month at Classics on Tap, I record a new chapter from a classic business book to help you make a difference. Download your first chapter at classicsontap.com. And we're back with Melissa Agnes in the Blitz Round. I'm going to ask you, Melissa, a few either-or questions related to the actual preparation and performance of your recent talk. Are you ready?
Okay. I'm ready.
Here's the first one. Were you selected to speak or did you apply?
I was selected. I had the honor of being asked.
Are you a memorizer, an improviser, or a blender?
I am a memorizer, but I don't even like to say memorize, but yes.
Is that how you prepared for this? Primarily?
Yes.
Okay. How'd that serve you?
Pretty well. I mean, I was on time and on target and, did me well.
Great. So, it's a performance. So did you have nerves or were you in the zone or neither or both?
So my TEDx talk was back in 2015 and I was really a young starter in public speaking. So I was very, very nervous. I had read The Miracle Morning. prior to that. And I was very dedicated for the week leading up and the morning of in visualization and just kind of getting myself in that zone. And I would visualize exactly what success looked like. And I was successful in accomplishing that visualization in that moment.
What's a tip, a technique, or a tool that helped you in addition to visualization?
People. I recorded myself because I didn't have a coach back then. So I recorded myself giving the talk several times and sent them off to different rounds of people and then got their feedback and improved my talk from there.
What's the most unexpected, strange, or just plain weird thing that happened during or right before you got up to speak?
None. I know that you were going to ask that. I was like, nothing strange or unexpected. Thankfully, I'm risk management, right? So
this was the emergency management department. When the emergency management department puts on a TEDx talk or branded talk, there might not be anything crazy.
Yeah, hopefully, we hope.
Or then it might be a crisis, or it might just be an issue. If something did happen,
it's
right?
Just an issue. and in the speaker world, there's tons of them.
For sure. Now, Talk Universe, I am hoping that you will check out our show notes page, because then you're going to be able to connect with Melissa Agnes. You can go to her talk and you can watch that. It's called The Secret for Successful Crisis Management in the 21st Century. It's at our show notes page at BeTheTalk.com. You can also connect with Melissa Agnes at her website, melissaagnes.com. And in just a moment, we're going to be right back with Melissa Agnes for the final word of advice for You Talk Universe. Everyone wants to change the world, but not everyone knows the first step. Before you can change the world with your talk, it has to be selected. So grab the templates, timelines, and tools that I use to get my talk selected at BeTheTalk.com. And we're back with Melissa Agnes and the final word of advice.
From me to you is in speaking, right? Not in crisis. Know your content. Be prepared. Put time and energy into honing your craft.
Melissa Agnes, thanks so much for coming on the talk today and sharing your amazing insight and wisdom with Talk Universe.
Thanks to you, Nathan.
Thanks for listening to Be the Talk. For tips and resources to help you change the world, go to BeTheTalk.com. See you tomorrow.